Welcome back. Well, to help us unpack the Constitutional Court's decision on former President Jacob Zuma's rescission application, we're now joined by legal expert Pooja Delacron, a partner at Weber Wenzel. Pooja, thank you so much. You were the fifth respondent for the Helen Suzman Foundation during the rescission application. The majority of the Constitutional Court said Mr. Zuma did not meet the requirements of a rescission application, one of them being the absence of a party. Can you just unpack that for us, please?
Thanks very much, Annika. I think this judgment is once again a resounding victory for the rule of law. And the high watermark, I think, of this entire judgment is that Mr. Zuma is the author of his own peril. He certainly did not meet any of the requirements under Rule 42, which is the mechanism via which a litigant can ask for rescission of a judgment. Mr. Zuma had based his rescission application on two of the grounds, saying that the judgment was granted in his absence and there was a patent error in the judgment. The Court dismissed those arguments without more, in the sense that it was Mr. Zuma himself that elected time and time again not to participate in these proceedings. And further, simply because Mr. Zuma belatedly came to the party to raise the defenses that he ought to have raised in the contempt proceedings, these belated attempts to secure his position does not elevate his case to one that amounts to a rescindable rescission of the judgment and the order. The court ultimately held that there was no error in the judgment, and Mr. Zuma's election not to participate is what tied the courts of the hand, the hands of the court ultimately.
Which is what Justice Sisi Kampepe actually said. She also used the word butchered the process and then played the role of victim, and she used the word skullduggery. Just explain to viewers, please, what it means when a case is dismissed with costs. That's a statement.
Sure. The costs issue is one that is provided by our law when a court has ruled for or against a litigating party. In this instance, the court has found that Mr. Zuma did not succeed in his application, and the costs usually follow the cause. In this instance, Mr. Zuma has been ordered to pay the costs of the State Capture Commission and Justice Sondo as the second applicant, and that is the normal process that is followed in legal proceedings when a litigant is unsuccessful in their application.
Pooja, this now means that Jacob Zuma is still in contempt of the Zondo Commission, and despite the fact that he is on medical parole, his 15-month sentence is upheld. It stands.
Yes, that's right, Annika. Mr. Zuma's application for rescission has failed. It means that the judgment and the order of the Constitutional Court in the contempt proceedings is extant and binding. There's an unfortunate complication now that Mr. Fraser has taken the decision to place Mr. Zuma on medical parole. That matter is a separate matter. It will run its course. But it has the unfortunate impact of in a sense, undermining the judgment of the Constitutional Court.
Expand on that, please, Pooja.
Sure. So, as a matter of law, the Court has now determined that Mr. Zuma is not entitled to a rescission of the judgment and order. As we all know, Mr. Zuma is no longer incarcerated in Escort prison. The argument, certainly, that many civil society organizations are now raising is that the decision that was taken by Mr. Fraser to place Mr. Zuma on medical parole was unlawfully taken. Ultimately, the effect of that decision, however, is that Mr. Zuma is no longer incarcerated. He's placed on something called community parole. Nobody really understands what that means, but ultimately the unfortunate outcome is that whilst the judgment of the Constitutional Court has been handed down today, upholding its judgment in the contempt proceedings, Mr. Zuma doesn't find himself in Escort prison.
The initial ruling by the Constitutional Court was 7-2, 2 being the minority. Was there a minority judgment again today?
Yes, interestingly, again by the same justices of the Con Court who dissented in the previous judgment. It was Jafta J and Taran J. Interestingly, on the grounds that the procedure followed by the Constitutional Court in handing down its judgment was unconstitutional, in that it violated Mr. Zuma's constitutional right to a fair trial and freedom and security of the person under Section 12 of the Constitution.
All right, so there you have it, Puja Delcron explaining and unpacking the Constitutional Court's ruling that Jacob Zuma has failed in his rescission application. His 15-month sentence is confirmed and that application was rejected.